But let me tell you something, man. The difference between like a $200 bidet and a $5,000 bidet is like night and day. It's like going from driving a Tesla to like a Yugo. I said, someday I would like to own a $5,000 bidet. All right, Forrest, we're back. We're back in the studio.
Wow, it's magic.
Is your seat still warm when you last left?
It's it had cooled off, but it definitely retained its shape.
My gosh, it feels so good to be back in the studio, and we are so happy to be back on campus. But we've got cyberkinetic warrior Forrest. Do you like that introduction? Yes, fighting the bad guys.
Like a MMA fighter with that title, man.
I'm Hef. I'm your NPC, your non-playable character. Hey, we're going to try to remix the week's news. And boy, this week's news is wild.
Oh, yeah.
We have a little bit of analysis, some lessons learned. We mix in a little comedy. We don't take ourselves too serious, but we're right here live in the Silicon Slopes of beautiful, beautiful Utah. Our top stories: unprecedented for us. The FBI hacking these Exchange servers. That's breaking news today. So we're going to touch on that. And also all these hacked companies, they seem like they're gaslighting us and they're downplaying the severity of the breach. So we're going to talk about that. And we'll talk about LinkedIn, some new malware with using LinkedIn to try to get access to you, and the Park Mobile breach. So that's all next here on the SM News. All right, Forrest. Hey, let's talk about the Park Mobile breach. Yeah. Now, the Park Mobile breach, if you're not familiar with Park Mobile, it's an app. It helps you with parking, but it's a big company. I mean, they are like everywhere. They're in every major city. I know they're here in Utah too, but Atlanta-based company. These guys, they kind of downplayed their breach a little bit, and this happened back in March 26th, and they didn't really talk about it at all. What we know from what we understand from reading and finding out about this thing is that data from anybody that used Park Mobile was up on a Russian forum site.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. There was a bunch of information that was breached. They had email addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, license plates, in some cases home addresses, as well as hashed passwords. They were using bcrypt, and they were salted as well. So I guess that's kind of fortunate in that regard. But I mean, realistically, how much of that is needed? If I'm going someplace and I'm parking my car, really all you need to know is this spot paid for or not? Like, right. do you really need my my name, my home address, my date of birth? Like, come on. Come on.
Well, Brian Krebs, got the security researcher. If you don't follow Brian Krebs, I mean, he's a pretty big writer in our industry. He got caught up in this, and what was really interesting is the company that found out about it, they notified Brian, and then Brian wrote a story about it, and then that's how it really made the news. So Brian, I think he said he had like 4 cars caught up in this thing. I mean, this is some nasty stuff. The actual cybersecurity incident that this is tied to was a vulnerability in some sort of third-party software. I mean, how many times have we heard that? Like, stop me, Forrest.
Yeah. Is it actually third-party?
Yeah, same song and dance.
Is this a Ubiquiti third-party where the third party is just AWS? Like, I guess we'll see. But I mean, until companies start viewing customer data as a liability rather than something to be hoarded as a potential asset, I think we're just going to continue seeing this crap happen over and over again.
There are some disheartening things when you can see a person's traffic pattern and clearly the privacy issue too, but knowing where somebody parks, and especially if you're a celebrity or a government official, being able to have that information, that intelligence about somebody is critical. So no honor, Forrest. There's no honor among thieves. Did you know that? You ever hear that line?
Oh yeah. It's this next story is about Swarmshop, a carding forum that itself got hacked. So I mean, this is a place where they usually go to peddle breaches of their own, and pretty crazy stuff that somebody then went and hacked the hackers. Gave them a taste of their own medicine. Pretty interesting case all around. Yeah,
from what we understand, the Swarmshop is a mid-sized, type of shop. It's not a big shop, but it's not a small shop either. And what the hackers were able to do is they actually stole personal information, payment information, administrative records, nicknames, buyer history, all that stuff, and they put it up for sale. So, if you're at one of those shops, those card breach shops where you go on the dark web and you're buying credit card numbers, stolen credit card numbers, and the hackers are just, they don't care. They don't care if you're on the other side of the coin, you're the good guy or the bad guy. They're still coming after you.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately probably just comes down to money. I mean, there may be a bit of some ego involved in all of this. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the old hacker zines where, somebody would say, oh, I went and owned so-and-so's box. Check out his, file directory structure, and here's the contents of some random file to prove it. Like, it's kind of interesting stuff. But I thought a fun point of this one was, they said they didn't get much money from their accounts. They typically don't keep them topped off. They just add funds as needed. So they only got $18 million. Only $18 million.
Just 18. Forrest, we never talk about physical security, folks. And I always want to talk about physical security.
I think it's underrated.
It's underrated.
Totally
isn't
underrated.
It? Oh, it's totally underrated. So this story is not really in the news, and that's what I like about it. And I find it funny, but there's also like a serious part of it too. You talk about pen testing and the physical part of pen testing, like breaking into an organization. Like, if you were going to do it, what would be the best way to break into a secure building?
Oh, dude, you can get to so many places using nothing more than a high-vis vest, a toolbox, and a clipboard. Like, that and some confidence will get you to a bunch of different places. I mean, back in the day, I used to dabble in urban exploring.
All right, there we go.
And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of just going places you would never expect to see. I saw people's fiber backbones that were connecting entire campuses. I saw
unlocked, right? Cabs,
all that
stuff.
It was. I could just walk up to it. I have. It's nutty. Absolutely nutty, the kind of stuff you can see. Access to a museum storage room. The rooftops of buildings. There's so much, and a lot of it is just relying on blind trust. Like, nobody's actually checking that door is locked like it's supposed to be.
And that's why this story is so fascinating to me. So the campus of USC, University of Southern California, the football facility was infiltrated. I like to call it a pen test by a homeless guy. And what a homeless guy was able to do this story just cracks me up. He was able to walk on campus, and with the COVID protocols, they relaxed a lot of the COVID protocols. So you know how like a lot of places have thumbprint scanners to get you in and out of the building? Well, what the homeless guy was able to do is in the football practice facility, he was able to just literally piggyback into the building behind other football players. And this guy, Forrest, was like hanging out in the jacuzzi. This homeless dude was on the field, literally with a jersey on, folks. Right? Like, I mean, you talk about tailgating. This is like real life tailgating, just hanging out, eating with the other football players, and nobody noticed this guy.
Yeah, just grab a helmet, some cleats, and away you go. I mean, just confidence is key. As long as you think you should be there, then you should be there, Who's going to challenge you on it?
I love this story, though, because, so often we get caught up in all the technical stuff, and we talk about so much of, like, hey, man, you got to worry about these vulnerabilities and exploits. But if you're not even thinking about your physical security, you're in trouble.
Oh man, it's another one of those things where it's once you start to see how the sausage is made, it's absolutely horrifying. Like, if you want to get a good idea of how fragile your physical security world is, go check out a couple places. One guy, Deviant Olem, has a great YouTube channel. He talks at many conferences, amazing content. The other is the Lock-Picking Lawyer. Have you seen the Lock-Picking Lawyer?
No,
This dude is amazing. Like, just the number of locks that he just completely dominates in less than a minute it's obscene. absolutely obscene. And most of his videos are like 3 to 4 minutes long.
Yeah.
And the majority of that is him describing the lock and the process, and then the actual picking portion is seconds.
That's what's great about DEF CON. The lock picking stuff at DEF CON is fantastic too.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's a physical puzzle. It's just, it's fun.
All right, we got to switch gears.
Anyway.
We got to talk about more breaches in the news because this week was just nonstop. Clubhouse. Clubhouse is a unique app. It's one of the. It's like you're your own DJ or hosting your own radio station, and you invite people into your channels, and then they can kind of hear the list of music that you've curated. Well, they're back in the news. They were actually in the news I want to say maybe a couple months ago, but this time 1.5 million users roughly were part of this scraping. Does this sound familiar? This actually happened with Facebook. If you guys recall, Facebook had a scraping incident this past week, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But Clubhouse, similar attack vector, where the bad guy's just going out and scraping the data. And Clubhouse said, "Oh, nothing to see here, folks. Move along, move along. It's publicly available data. You gave it to us, and we put it up on our app. There's nothing to see here."
Yeah. The way that they try and spin these things, it's pretty upsetting. It's not a breach. It's not a hack. It was a publicly available API upon which they put no restrictions.
Right.
Like if I can query your API millions and millions of times to scrape this data, you're doing it wrong. I'm sorry, but that's on you. Like if you take on that data, you have a responsibility for that data. Just saying, oh well, it's publicly available. You're trying to eschew any responsibility whatsoever, and it just doesn't fly with me.
It really bothers me, Forrest, and we're seeing so much of this data scraping stuff going on. Yeah. And a lot of my friends in the industry, they're all saying the same thing, like, "Oh, it's no big deal." They're downplaying it for us, and I'm getting fired up. I'm getting like, "Oh, I want to talk about this." This is wrong. This is absolutely wrong to downplay these types of breaches and to say that. I feel like it's a victim mentality. Like it's my fault that I gave my data to Clubhouse and their data got scraped. It's my fault that I gave my data to Facebook and they got scraped.
I don't know, man. There's so many things that can be done to circumvent this kind of thing. You can have quotas, you can have rate limiting, you can have require a token that expires after. There's any number of different ways that somebody could protect these things, but it's just it seems like they don't care until the horse is out of the barn and there's no coming back from it.
Well, you can put the horse back in the barn, but it takes a lot of effort and energy. Because once your data's out there, it's out there. There's no getting it back. So, and the thing about this breach is there's been a lot of talk, Forrest, about gaslighting, and we are going to talk about gaslighting here in just a minute. And I'll tell you, Forrest, this is the kind of stuff that if you're not fired up yet, get ready, folks, because we're going to do our top stories now. All right, Forrest, this was all over the news this afternoon. This press release came out from the FBI, and not a lot of the major news media has picked up on it. A few of the industry journals that we follow talked about it, but the FBI they got a court order. They're now remotely hacking hundreds of computers related back to that Microsoft Exchange server breach, and they're trying to do this in order to protect. I put the word "protect" in quotes there. Did you like that?
Yeah. It's fun. It's this Exchange breach is just the gift that keeps on giving.
It doesn't stop.
These exploits just are an endless cycle of more news. I mean, we've been talking about this for 2 months now. It's man, pretty unprecedented where a government organization is now going out and ethically hacking servers in the US to try and remove these web shells that have been left behind. It's interesting because if I remember right, this was something that the NSA had said that they wanted to do, was more offensive defense, where they're actually going in and hacking systems that are vulnerable, patching the vulnerability, and then walking away. I mean, it really depends on how much you trust the government to do those things. And I mean, here's my tinfoil hat, but I haven't really trusted the NSA since about 2013 when Snowden came forward with everything that he had.
Yes.
So, I mean, granted, in the optimistic sense, I hope that the FBI isn't leaving something extra behind when they're cleaning up after these breaches. But
do you remember that story about we talked about a little bit about the child porn and the FBI? Maybe the audience remembers some of that too.
This was, I believe it was called Operation Torpedo, clever name there, where they actually took over a child pornography server on the darknet. It was like a forum where people were exchanging material, and they then used that server to distribute network access tools where they could then trace back the people that were exchanging this material. Not only did they pick it up and run it, but they made it run better. When you're spooling up resources to then better serve a child porn forum, you have to stop to wonder, okay, like, are we the baddies?
I mean, question that, right?
It's really just an ugly situation all around, and ultimately it did result in some convictions. But I mean, that's where you start getting into interesting questions with things like entrapment and all that sort of thing. I mean, I leave the legal side of the house to my wife. That's her domain.
But the wild part about this whole FBI getting a court order and doing the remote hacking is a lot of these exchange servers, the businesses are not even aware that the FBI is involved, right?
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting, Forrest, is this press release comes out, and when you read it, it sounds like this is the only warning that these businesses are going to get. Like, hey, this is all we're going to say is we're putting out this press release. We got this court order, and if you still have a vulnerable exchange server in your environment, we're coming after you to help you. And oh, by the way, we're not actually going to pick up the phone and call you and tell you that we're doing this either. That's the way I perceive it when I read that press release.
Yeah. I'm hoping there's been at least some sort of effort using, I don't know, Whois, or they've got plenty of ASN information that they can use to find ISPs and get in contact, so on and so forth, whatever. But I mean, regardless, it's still unauthorized access, even if you're trying to do the right thing. I mean, I have to wonder, if I were to do this as an everyday citizen,
right.
Would I end up being, in federal prison as a result? I don't know. It's just an interesting.
Forrest, what's interesting too is the way it comes across is they're painting the bad guy as the exploits and the breach, and they're saying, it's because of the bad stuff that's in your environment. That's what we're coming after.
Yeah. I think the specific legal avenue was that they were executing a search warrant against the exchange servers to then seize the illicit malware. Was the
eloquently
kind of
put for us,
legal justification. So it's kind of a I don't know, man. It's completely unprecedented to see a government hacking its own servers with its own servers of its own citizens within the bounds of the
way
US.
You talk, Forrest, I would hire you as my lawyer. I just want you to know that.
I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice.
All right, here we go, Forrest. Danger.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Yeah, we got to talk about gaslighting. And, oh, man, Forrest, I am just fired up now. The whole Facebook scraping, the data being scraped, and then it's just a barrage of news media articles of asking Facebook, hey, 500 million records, all right, got released. And we're talking phone numbers and all types of jazz out there. But this stuff gets released and there's no getting it back. And Facebook's like, again, nothing to worry about here, guys. It's not a breach. It's just some data being scraped off our website. You don't have to worry about anything. And it's not new data either. That's the other thing we need to talk about too. This is going far back, like 2019. This is nothing new.
And that was the whole thing. Is it's like, oh, this happened, 2 years ago, and it's like, okay, well, now you're only trying to do damage control just because it's become, it's come to the forefront of things. Like, man, I don't know. It just all these breaches and the minimization and rationalization and all this just, it makes it feel like it's an abusive partnership, you know?
Yeah.
Just feels like there's massive manipulation. Like, Facebook says that, the phone numbers were public, even though they're not published on anybody's profiles. Their justification for that was, it's discoverability. If you indicated that you want somebody to be able to find you by your phone number,
Right.
we now consider that public information. Phone numbers are really tough because they're easily iteratable. You can just go through a massive list and check, okay, are there any profiles associated with this number? I'm going to upload 1,000+ contacts, and you're going to tell me everybody that has a Facebook profile. Okay, cool. And then you just multiply that out. Like that's again, kind of going back to you're lacking security controls on, preventing this stuff from happening in the first place. And the other aspect of this that really grinds my gears is, there's always, just this mealy-mouthed, weasel-wordy garbage of sophisticated threat actors. Every attack is done by a sophisticated threat actor. And how many of them are, actually script kiddies, just launching stuff with Metasploit. Like, come on, and every incident responder or top minds kind of thing.
They're all behind it.
Oh yeah. It's, I don't know, man.
But Forrest, there's some in the news media that has picked up on this. I know we have. And you talk about trends of these companies that are getting breached and they're not making a big deal about it. They're downplaying, how irresponsible is that and dangerous for us? The quote that I always like to use is, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And if I know my phone number's out there and Facebook's is telling me this, or Clubhouse or LinkedIn or any of these other companies that are downplaying these breaches, I need to know, because I need to be at least a little bit more proactive, a little more vigilant. And we'll put up on the screen here in just a second here, we'll put up a visual of what some of these alerts look like. You have your phone, and on your phone, you're probably getting spammed left and right, these SMS text messages, Forrest.
Oh yeah.
They're so hard to decipher, because you're getting them, and the warning looks something like that, where it's your bank telling you, hey, a payment was attempted on a new device. If it's not you, log into this thing, and you get that notice for us, like I'm eating lunch, or I'm doing my work day, and that text comes through. I'm like, what's going on here? I better click on this link. Oh wait a minute. This isn't normal.
Yep.
What is this craziness that's on my phone right now?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, and it's not just the text messages. It's it opens the door to robocalls or vishing. Any number of different things where they now have a lot more information to try and build a profile on, and then call you up and operate off of that. So it's man.
But people are accepting this, Forrest, as like the new normal, and that's what's bothering me. It's not just the companies that are downplaying this, and we saw this this has been happening a while now, but I saw this with the CETA breach. CETA was that IT company based down in the South that they control like 90% of vendor services for airlines. And, they have access to all these frequent flyer data type information, and they kind of blew it off too. Like, oh, it's just your frequent flyer data, nothing to worry about. But people are accepting this for us as like it's normal. But when companies, they have to own up to this stuff. They gotta acknowledge at least that the data is out there. You should be on the lookout for these kind of SMS messages, for example. And we're trusting them, Forrest.
Yeah.
I'm trusting you guys to be truthful and not just care about protecting your stock price.
Yeah. That's why I was really impressed with like the FireEye disclosure, where they came out and they got ahead of the ball. They're like, look, here's everything we know. This is what's happening. Here's how you can try and detect this. Like they did the right thing 100%. I wish more companies would take that approach where it's just like, what, completely upfront and honest. But instead you get a lot of these responses that are just, forced through this legal defense filter where, it's
scraping is a common tactic, folks.
Yeah.
We'll have a little bit on our blog, and like that was it. That's all you're going to announce about this thing? You're not going to do anything more?
There's a lot of technically true statements, where, you know, when you really get into it, it's like, well, that's a very misleading approach. I mean, again, with like the Ubiquiti AWS, yeah, technically that was a third-party provider, but it wasn't the third-party provider that was hacked, even though that was the way you set up the sentence, as you know, to imply that. It reeks of. Do you ever read the Wheel of Time?
Yes,
the Aes Sedai truth, where, you know, it's the truth, but it's not the truth in the way you think it is, kind of thing.
They pitch it, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so what do you do if you're out there and you're wondering, hey, my information was caught up in the Facebook breach or any of these breaches? There's a website you can go to.
Have I been pwned? That's PWNED. HaveIBeenPwned.com.
Advice is free, and we highly recommend you use this site. You could enter in your email information. You can also enter in your phone number, and it'll give you back the data of what your information was in any breaches that have been out there. And it's a site that we use and regularly recommend to our friends and family.
Yeah, it's definitely trustworthy. The dude that runs it, Troy Hunt, is very prominent in the industry. He has a lot of articles detailing how he's doing this securely. So, you know, he's not just scraping data and harvesting it. He's, you know, he doesn't keep any of this around. And yeah, it's very interesting reading some of the technical approaches that he's taken for this stuff.
I get a lot of questions too, Forrest, from friends and family especially. What else can I do? I mean, my information was up in this breach, in the Facebook thing or the Ubiquiti or any of the other thousands of breaches that have now happened. What can I do if it tells me my information has been breached? And of course, resetting passwords is key. We always recommend to never use the same passwords that you have across all of your devices. Password managers help manage that.
Oh yeah. The less you have to remember, the easier it is. You know, I have maybe 3-4 passwords that I have to remember. That's like disk decryption, logging into my user profile, and then my password manager. And then everything else is, you know, that's off. You know, I don't have to worry about memorizing which password for which site or which one had these requirements versus that. It's just, you know, I like the term treat passwords like cattle. You know, they're not pets. You just cycle through it. If somebody gets breached, oh well, roll a new random one, and there you go. You know, it's no skin off your back.
So often, though, what we see is the trends of the threat actors they're using your personal life to pivot into your work life. So if you have the same password for your Netflix, your Disney Plus, your Amazon Prime, you go through all Discovery Plus, what are all the others out there for us, right?
Oh, there's too many.
Oh my gosh!
Count.
But if you're using the same password, though, that's where it gets into trouble, and you got to take a little bit more ownership on that piece.
Yeah. If you've reused passwords for like VPN credentials or something, I mean, that's a perfect way for somebody to pivot. It's password spraying is super common.
But wait, there's more. One more thing you should always do, and that's turn on MFA, multi-factor authentication.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, you should always turn that on. And what's really cool is Facebook actually has MFA, which I'm surprised how many people don't even know that.
Oh man, and some of these services, it's been a struggle to get actual multi-factor authentication on. Like I think Twitter. It took Jack getting hacked before they're like, okay, maybe we should start thinking about multi-factor as being a thing.
But they don't even show you. That's the thing too. They make it so buried in the app, and then they don't even talk about, hey, we added that feature, Forrest, of MFA into our Instagram app. Have you looked at that yet?
And a lot of the time, it's not even real secure multi-factor. It's, we just use SMS messages, and it's like that is not secure by any means.
But it's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing. You raise the bar. You're not the lowest of hanging fruit at that point. But I still strongly prefer like a time-based one-time password, TOTP, using something like Google Authenticator, Authy, and OTP, Aegis, whatever,
So multi-factor authentication, we need to mention too that if you don't have it turned on you really should go through your phone, look at your apps, the most commonly used apps, especially banking apps. I mean, more than anything, you better have MFA turned on for your banking apps, especially Venmo, PayPal, any one of those, your finance apps, if you have accounting, that kind of stuff. You got to turn that stuff on, folks.
My biggest recommendation is always email, because if somebody gets your email, they can get any other account that you've used to sign up with that. Password reset, cool, I've got it. Definitely secure your email right out the gate.
All right, we're on the back half of the show right now, and that means it's time for more gaslighting. What?
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Good stuff, right? Yeah, I can't make this stuff up, folks. It's like a comedy. It's a tragic comedy. Ubiquiti back in the news. Oh my gosh! So we talked in the last episode. We talked about Brian Krebs having a whistleblower come to him and basically said, "Hey, we found all this stuff going on, and I'm going to announce it and tell Brian Krebs about what really happened behind the Ubiquiti breach." But Brian Krebs then went back to Ubiquiti and said, "Confirm that this stuff is true. Is it real? I mean, what this guy told me, is any of this true?" And you know what Ubiquiti is going to do. No, nothing to see here, folks. Move along. But Ubiquiti actually put out a response back on March 31st. And they said, hey, in our community forum, with regards to that interview that the whistleblower did with Brian Krebs, we did a thorough analysis, thorough investigation. And again, we're sticking to our story.
Yeah. Just kind of, just walk around the thing, they're not saying anything was untrue. Right. So, I mean, that's more telling than anything there.
But I get my stock advice from Brian Krebs. And we're going to put up a screenshot here. Brian Krebs said, well, is it about the stock advice? Because guess what happened? When he broke the news about the whistleblower, the stock price finally started going down. And that's what's interesting to me. So when Ubiquiti initially announced about this, they said, it's all right, nothing to worry about, folks. And then of course the stock is doing great, right? I mean, the way they pitched that announcement for us, it was about protecting the stock, and all these companies are doing that, where that whole ethics piece comes into play. And of course, when Brian did it, the stock starts going down in a burning ring of fire, and that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's. I definitely understand trying to defend the company in that sense, but at the same time, you also put your users at risk, and your users are the entire reason that your business exists to begin with. So, I mean, don't forget, at the end of the day, that's who you ultimately serve, not your board, not your shareholders. It's your users, your customers.
Forrest, it's time for the mystery grab bag. This is my favorite part of our show, and we're going to wrap it up here with some odds and ends. These are news stories that I know you find funny, or I find interesting, or there's good lessons learned that you can get out of this. And the first one we want to talk about is Capcom, and they got breached last year. We actually do threat briefings here on campus for our employees, and we talked about it. And originally, we had thought maybe the attribution piece was tied to something in Japan where they're headquartered. And I know you thought it was Chun-Li or Ken or Ryu that was Street Fighter 2 behind.
Yeah, my
this
vote
Capcom
was
breach.
M. Bison.
M. Bison, yeah.
M. Bison,
But
or Mega Man. Dr. Wily. There you go.
Capcom's a video game company. They had a breach. They actually released an update. And we will always try to do this with all of you in the audience. We try to talk about the breach, and then if there's an update a couple months later, we'll try to give you those details. And it's nice when companies do this, when they get closure on their incident response, because it gives us some insights on things that we need to be thinking about and talking about. And in this situation, it was a VPN.
Yeah, I love reading postmortems of breaches. Like there's no higher concentration of good security advice and best practices and things to look into than in a postmortem. I mean, that's where you're going to find all the nitty-gritty details of what went wrong, what to fix, how to prevent it. It's an absolute gold mine. And I think any organization that publishes their postmortem,
Mad respect,
100%.
Yeah. And in the Capcom breach, so it's tied back to an old VPN that they were getting ready to reach end of life. They were doing a tech refresh on their VPNs, and they found out that, that's how the threat actor got in the environment. So really cool to actually have that information. And we'll include the link to this story as well, that you can read about the actual press release from Capcom. So
yeah, the VPN piece, definitely. There was a lot of scrutiny of that, over work from home, COVID, all that. So it definitely makes sense that that's what would have been leveraged. And then as a result, that additional scrutiny, resulted in new CVEs for VPNs coming out. And it's always a juicy target. And again, kind of going back to the earlier call out, if you're reusing passwords, that's a wonderful target for password sprays.
Oh yeah, big time. And that kind of gets back to what our next story is about, which is now talking about threat vectors. And when we talk about threat vectors, what we're talking about is pathways or doorways that bad guys use to try to get into your environment. And it's always important to know what are the trending threat vectors and pathways that these threat actors are using to get into your environment. So 1,000% increase in the use of PDF files involved in phishing attacks. This came out of Palo Alto's Unit 42, fantastic team. So from 2019 to 2020, they released, they noticed, this Unit 42 folks, they noticed a dramatic increase, 1,160% increase in the use of malicious PDF files. And what they're saying is that bad guys are using that more and more and more as the pathway to get malware or into your environment. So if you know that and you could be on the lookout for it, that's what helps, from a user awareness perspective in your environment.
Yeah. One thing that I'm kind of upset about is just how pervasive PDFs have become. I mean, everything is a PDF now.
Right.
Your utility bill, like any invoice, like stuff that shouldn't even be a PDF is now done in PDF. I mean, there's no end to it.
Well, this specific and it's really the most common form of PDF phishing is using a lure where they use the CAPTCHA. So I want you to be aware of that, folks in the audience, is that if you get a PDF and it looks suspicious and it's got one of those CAPTCHAs where you've got to enter in you got to choose the image or you got to write in some data like that, that's the stuff you got to be on the lookout for. They were actually using it when you click on the continue button. They're saying that you're seeing more and more threat actors that are doing that. Click on the continue button. It'll link you out then to the site to continue the fun experience with the PDF, but that actually connects you to a malicious site. So
yeah, and just the amount of stuff that's allowed in PDFs is, oh man, it doesn't stop. You can load remote content, you can run JavaScript. I mean, there's just so much that can be leveraged, and it's a great way to get it in front of the user and get them to click a link. This video is paused. Click this, or just any number of avenues that's just very easy to get a user to interact with it.
All right, Forrest. This is we were down to our final two stories now, and this is the one that always gets me, Forrest. LinkedIn, and people love LinkedIn. I don't have a profile on LinkedIn. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't understand it.
I mean, yeah, the whole like professional social networking thing, I don't know. The only time I've used LinkedIn was in capture the flag competitions. So
it's like waving a sign that says, "Hackers, I'm here." And this is my title, my job title. And not only is my job title here, but this is the company I work with. And if you want, these are all the people that I'm connected with that you can send phishing emails to right here. All these people, because I'll probably click on a link from one of my friends that's the kind of attitude I have if I'm a bad guy. I'm going to use LinkedIn.
There's so much OSINT that can happen just from LinkedIn. It's like, okay, if I want to do recon on a company, I'm going to go to their LinkedIn and start seeing, who works for them. What's their tech stack? What are they using? Like what frameworks are they employing?
Because people list that in their resume.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they list all the software, all the tools.
Yep.
So if you're out there, look at your resumes of the employees and go, oh my gosh, look at all this data all this intelligence I can gather. Oh, you use Linux in your environment. If I'm a threat actor, you got Microsoft. Oh, you're very familiar with Windows Server. So that's the challenge.
Here's this very obscure FTP framework or some very specific library that hasn't been updated in 5 years, yet that's still being, listed on somebody's resume. It's like, okay, that's pretty specific.
Well, I should mention that there's all types of service providers out there, and one of them is called the Malware as a Service Provider. We don't have a lot of time today to really dive into how these Malware as a Service Provider shops work, but you need to be aware of something called golden eggs. The name probably won't ring a bell to you, but what would ring a bell is if you got a document that looked like this, and we'll show it up on the screen right now, and if somebody potentially pretended like they were a friend, they messaged you on LinkedIn and said, hey, I'm a recruiter. Hey, Forrest, I'm a recruiter from Hershey. I love your LinkedIn profile. I want to hire you. Would you go ahead and look at this PDF that I'm going to send you?
Sure, send it over.
All right.
I love PDFs.
Please do. And hey, when you fill it out, by the way, I'll have someone from my team get back in touch with you. And lo and behold, you didn't know this, but that malware in that PDF was fileless malware, stealthily installed. It starts hijacking legitimate Windows processes behind the scenes, and it's all through this decoy of this employment application. And you thought you were doing the right thing. I'm going to do something better for my family. I'm going to get a new job, and it was not the case.
Yeah, it's a pretty scummy approach, but I mean, then again, most cybercrime is pretty scummy, so there's nothing good that comes about any of this.
The name of it though is great. The chicken that keeps laying new eggs, new golden eggs, and these malware as a service provider. There's all types of tools out there, and unfortunately, we don't have time today to go over a lot of these different types of tools. And I definitely think maybe on a future episode we have to spend some time talking about how some of them are really wicked stuff out there for us. All right, our final story, and this is interesting. I thought this was interesting, and about wine. And what threat actors are doing for us is they know that people are home, and they know that they are Googling wine companies, and they're drinking wine. Hopefully, they're not drinking wine while they're working remotely from home. But
no, that's apple juice in that glass.
That's right. But what we're finding is a rise in registration of domains that are maliciously tied back to wine or wine companies, and wine scamming is on the rise. 12,500 new malicious wine themed domains were registered back in May, and it's just heartbreaking to hear. I mean, you think about it though, they're brilliant on the part of the threat actors.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's some states that don't allow like wine of the month club or whatever kind of thing. Yeah. Utah being one. So pretty interesting when somebody sprouts up and is like, oh, hey, we can service your area. And it's like, really? No, they can't. They're just going to service you with malware.
Forrest, before we go, one more thing. What? I thought you said there was only two. We got to do one more thing.
Gotcha.
Forrest, some of the stuff about the vulnerabilities impacting hundreds of millions of industrial devices out there. This came out of a project called Project Memoria. It's sponsored and run by a company called Forescout. And what they found was that there are 9 vulnerabilities that impact 7 out of 15 of the TCP IP stacks. Which fascinating research, guys.
Yeah, it's pretty in depth how far they're digging into it. You don't really see a lot of people getting like that nitty gritty into the IP stack and really trying to just break things at that level. It's pretty cool stuff.
I will talk about the fact that some of these, they're saying it's very small TCP IP libraries that were discovered. The specific one that we need to talk about is called NameRec.
NameRec, yeah.
You love these. I know you love these names.
They're pretty good. I mean, there's been a bunch, especially with regard to like the TCP IP stacks. It was like 7 of 15 that were found vulnerable, but you're seeing a lot of these in embedded devices and IoT. And, a lot of these devices are probably never going to see an update in, their years of service. They're going to hang around forever. I mean, for instance, Ripple 20, I still see Ripple 20 all the time. And am constantly, telling people, hey, you need to patch and update your stuff. Like this is the real deal.
We talk a lot about that with clients, but I like some of these names. I mean, Ripple 20, and of course you talked about Amnesia.
Yeah. There's let me go down the list here. There's Ripple 20, Urgent 11, Amnesia 33. These sound like fragrances at a department store or something. I don't know.
I'm gonna go to Macy's and get some Ripple 20. It sounds like it would be delightful. on my body. But yeah, what's interesting about this one, Project Memoria, and this new name rec is that they actually are looking at the DNS traffic. They're looking at DNS communication, which is really cool versus actually looking at the TCP or IP part of the communication.
Yeah, and a lot of it is having to do with like enabling compression. So if a DNS request generates multiple A records, they're going to compress that to try and save on space, and that's actually what's allowing a lot of this to be exploitable as memory overwrites and things like that. So the one that I that really stuck out to me was that FreeBSD was actually affected by this, which also then means downstream projects like pfSense, OpenSense, those types of open source firewalls are also affected. So, and it's pretty nasty stuff. There's potential for DNS cache poisoning.
Oh yeah.
There was remote code execution.
You see a lot of that with our clients. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also some denial of service, but definitely something that you want to look out for. Make sure that none of your devices are affected by this, and if they are, get them updated ASAP.
Yeah, and those are good final words, final parting thoughts. We're glad you could join us again. We're so happy to be back in our studio.
So nice.
Yeah, it's so cool to be back in a warm seat. We hope you learned a lot. We hope you had some fun. I know we did. And please join us. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And if we hit 5,000 subscribers, I think, Forrest, I'll whip out the Chris Farley impersonation for the audience. What do you think?
It's coming up. I can feel it.
I can feel it too. You guys have a great one. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.